talk about with Stanley Kubrick, and we're talking about the Kubrick universe and all of the different ways that can go into. It's like endless, right? I mean, it's like somebody posted the other day. I couldn't believe I'd never thought of this or seen it, but um, Jethro sent me this. It was a screenshot of Jack Nicholson in The Shining, and his remember when he goes to the job interview and he's got his green tie. His green tie is, and this is obviously purposeful. This is Kubrick like at his most um complex and complete with his details. The tie, obviously, not obviously, but the tie, the texture of the tie that he's wearing, the green tie, is supposed to foreshadow and mimic the maze. So, I would say that Jack is the physical embodiment of the like he carries the maze around with him, right? He carries the labyrinth because Jack is the Minotaur, right, in the labyrinth in The Shining, and chasing. Remember, chasing Danny through the maze, and so there's a lot. There's a lot there. I mean, there's also the stuff like the uh the monolith in 2001. It's so obvious to me, and I didn't come up with this, but it's so obvious to me watching 2001 now that the monolith is the black cube rectangle of this. It is this. That's the monolith because it's it's otherworldly. It emits radiation. It's something that attracts everyone to it. They live by it, and it's something that's like becomes something sort of neo archetypal, in the film. And who was it? I think it was Rob Ager. It was Rob Ager at Collative Learning. Check out, you guys, I'm sure know Rob Ager's work. Rob Ager, and of course, Jay Dyer, Jay's analysis. Jay did his biggest streams, the ones that went mega viral were Eyes Wide Shut and The Shining. So Jay did awesome analyses of The Shining and Eyes Wide Shut. Maybe we should do um From Novell by Arthur Schnitzler. Maybe we should see if Jay wants to do that. We could do the short story that Eyes Wide Shut is based on. That might be interesting for a literary analysis. I've got it right up there somewhere. Um, so what was I saying? So yeah, so Rob Ager pointed out in Full Metal Jacket, there is an odd thing where when they're making their way through the kind of labyrinth of the city, in the end sequence of the film, there is a scene where one of the buildings is black. It looks like the monolith on fire, like it's burning. And ordinarily, like with, film analysis, when you point out details in films and you discuss the symbolism and how the kind of subtext of the film relates within the artwork, like you have to be careful that you're not pointing out extraneous details that are just like that have they have to work fluidly throughout the film, just like in a work of literature, right? This is like the way that, when we're talking about Shakespeare is the best example of this. When there's a word, for instance, that seems out of place in Shakespeare, even for an Elizabethan text, when there's a word that seems out of place, it has to relate later on in the film. It's like I think of it like a big spider web. Like the things have to connect. The levels even in a sonnet or in a lyric poem, the words all have to connect in different layers of meaning. They all have to be fluid. They all have to be consistent. So, there's a danger when watching Kubrick, especially, that he may send you on red herrings, and he can do that. But even the red herring itself has to be consistent in a Kubrick work. Like if something seems out of place, it has to connect to other things that are out of place. The form and the content have to work together. So, for example, like um, one of the things visually about I know I'm just babbling here. Just humor me while I babble. Thanks, thanks y'all for being here for this analysis of Michael Mann's The Keep that's sort of gone into other films. Um, there's a thing about The Shining where visually Kubrick always does this. Everything is square on, right? It's like you're moving. A lot of times you pan over or you follow the characters down the hall. Think of like following Danny down the hall when he's on his three wheel, right? Well, there's a part in The Shining where all of a sudden, it's right after she discovers that Jack has been writing the manifesto, the all work and no play make Jack a dull boy, right? Which is also fits in the film because it's like he's right. It's like a weird inverted nursery rhyme, right? Think of the encounter with the Gemini twins. Think of Danny at the beginning. Danny, dissociates. So we have like these nursery rhymes that sort of go like totally wrong, right? Well, after she discovers that, and we see her backing up, and she's got the knife in her hand, and her face, like you can tell that she at this point is also experiencing a severe trauma where like her mind is breaking, her psyche is breaking. Well, when we see that, right after we see that, the next angle that we see in the hotel, it's not like this anymore. It's like this. So we see instead of right angles and squares, we see like a weird kind of diagonal, and things don't make sense anymore. It's like when you're a kid and you go to like the science museum and they have that thing, at least they did here. You go to that thing where like you walk in the Alice in Wonderland little hallway, and it's like big at the start, and it's got a checkerboard floor, and then it gets warped and you end up like crouching down because there's a visual trick, there's an illusion. Well, it's like that. And that's to signify that everything that made sense in their world and for us, the audience, is now warped. So the things that we're seeing are skewed. Things they just don't make sense. They're not right. And it's a really subtle thing that Kubrick does that he's a master of. And I think that those are obviously the purposeful details in the cinematography and the staging, right, in the blocking. But those things for Kubrick especially are all purposeful. And you know, I tend to like I tend to hate like I'm glad we're away from the era of like the DVD commentary and the extra features because those annoy me because they're interesting like for people who like films, but in a way they don't matter. They're moot because if the thing cannot be explained in your analysis in terms of like the actual artwork, then it doesn't matter. And earlier I think I got sidetracked, but I was talking about how Tarantino said that I think it was Tarantino. He was talking about like the director's cut is not it's a thing, but it's not really a thing because whatever is produced as the final product of the film, the artwork, it has to be contained within the bookends of the work. So if there's a director's cut, that's a completely different film, right? Think about how like Apocalypse Now Redux is like becomes a completely different film. We have the French plantation scene, and that adds like there's this whole other element. Now that also does have the line that I think is probably the best line in the whole movie. I mean, every line's great, but the line where the French woman says to Willard, there she says, "There are two of you, one that loves and one that kills." And that is like the whole work, Heart of Darkness, right there in itself, right? That there are two of him. Just like there are sort of two Kurtzes, there are two Jack Torrances, there are certainly two Dannys. Um, Michael Hare also, by the way, the he wrote the voiceover for Apocalypse Now, and then he wrote the dialogue, some of the dialogue for Full Metal Jacket. One more interesting thing that I sort of realized I had like a weird epiphany about Kubrick the other day. I was watching a I was watching an interview with Vincent D'Onofrio. I just said that I hate these things, but this this like did provide some sort of insight for me. I was watching this interview with like Vincent D'Onofrio and Matthew Modine talking about Full Metal Jacket, and they were asking the crew is asking them about like Kubrick and about his directing style, and like the whole thing was about his takes, like how many takes he did. And that also is like bullshit to me. I can see Kubrick's, hearing about these things and being like, this is so who cares about this, right? And the reason being that, you know, I find that like so typical of actors. And I can say this because I was one that the actor the actor is being paid a lot of money to do to do a film to essentially to entertain people. And you think about how like kind of ridiculous that is on its face, that there are people who make their living entertaining people. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's ridiculous in light of the the everyday person who makes a living like laboring or doing something essential or like building something. And you have people that just go and play dress up and entertain. And that terminology I got from Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole, who discussed that. Like Richard Burton said that he just was astounded. He couldn't get over the fact that in his life, he came from Wales where everyone he knew and everyone in his family like broke their back as slate miners or coal miners in Wales. And yet here he was like playing dress up for a living. He thought it was ridiculous. And so the actors have this thing where like they get paid all this money to be on a film set. And then they complain because of the number of takes that the director makes them do in the film. Right. Because okay, so it's like, yeah, you're in that world and you have to be on set at 5 a.m. and then you work like this 15-hour day or whatever. Come on, man, you're playing, right? And that's one thing that I love about Tom Coombe is that uh he never cared about that. He's like, I'm here to do a professional job. We're going to entertain people. This is the job. And we're going to do as many takes as it takes, right? So I get, so he gets that. But Vincent D'Onofrio was like, they were like, okay, so how did he work with actors? And Vincent D'Onofrio was like, well, he would give us directions like he would say, okay, do it better. Or do that line over again and like just do it differently. Or it's not right. It's just okay, take 45. It's just not right. It doesn't work. It's not right. Or do it better. And the thing that I realized about this was that um one, on the surface level, obviously it's that Kubrick was not interested in like being an actor's director. Okay, which is obvious when you watch his films, but there's a reason for that. And the reason is that he's not interested in getting the realism of the method, deep emotion from the actors to, convey this to the audience. That's not what his films are like. His films are meant to be dreamlike and otherworldly. There's something amiss. That's like all of his movies are like that. You watch Eyes Wide Shut and you're like, why is Nicole Kidman talking like this? No one talks like this. And it's because it's surreal. When we see her speaking, we don't know as an audience member whether she's in the cult or she's not, whether she's dreaming the things she's talking about or whether it's a fantasy or whether she actually did them. And it's ambiguous, right? Um, Full Metal Jacket also is surreal. Like they Matthew Modine is a journalist Marine who goes into a war zone. They kill this sniper, and then the movie ends with them like singing the Mickey Mouse Club theme song. Like it's surreal because war itself is surreal, right? And our depiction of it, the way we view war, is surreal. So he's not interested in any of that stuff. And the number of takes are because Kubrick was cognizant of the fact that movies are, art does this, but movies are the thing that will live forever. So when actors like, are weird and like want, immortality in all their creepy ways, well, in one sense, they do get this in this, like in the sense that they're giants. They're larger than life. You go to the movies and you see them on a screen and they're literally bigger than everybody in the audience, right? You have a close up. All actors want a close up because their face takes up the entire screen and their face is bigger than, 10 humans standing on each other's shoulders. They're huge. They're larger than life. They are stars. They're called stars. Like we're looking up to them like they're celestial beings. They're on a silver screen, so it's like a magic, it's some sort of magic like scrying screen, right? We're like supposed to look beyond, you're piercing the veil to see like this other world. And when you're watching the movie, you suspend your disbelief, like Coleridge said about literature, and you believe the things that you're being shown. Right? That's what movies are. And Kubrick knew that you he wanted as many takes as it took to get what he knew would live forever. So if there's a mistake or there's something out of place, like it's going to be there forever. You can't change it when it's done, right? You can't change it. So, so I think that's interesting about Kubrick. But yeah, but the sort of epiphany that I had, the the complexity, like oftentimes simplicity is the answer. It's like the simplest answer for the most complex things. And I think that people watching Kubrick want to make a huge deal of all of the details and especially of the characters and their dialogue. But I think the answer is that that's part of it and that's in his mind. But really, what it comes down to is that um, the characters are pawns in this big chess game of all of his work, like of his oeuvre, right? And of course, Kubrick himself, he was a chess player, and all of his works are concern themselves like with different aspects of sort of deep societal issues that are bigger than the individual characters. They're playing roles in the context of this small thing in each story in each movie that are supposed to be emblematic of the bigger thing. But in the end, it's like the reason they act that way is because um, it's like he didn't. I don't think he cared. I don't think he cared about that. And that's weird because everything else in his films he cares about, but the way that the characters act, he does not care about. It's not important. And my reason for saying that is the very fact that he's like, just do it like this or do it better, right? And I know that the actors would say like, what's my motivation? What's my motivation in saying this? And where's my Evian? And he would be like, I'm not gonna. His answer was like, I'm not gonna do the work that you're supposed to be doing. Just do it right, and then we'll know. So it's like an accident. His films are accidental, and I think that that's sort of an epiphany because people want to think that his films are like planned all the way through. Everything's mapped out, right? Well, the shots are mapped out, and the set dressing is mapped out, and like the way the story goes is mapped out. But the way that the characters get there is accidental. It doesn't. It's like incidental. And when he found the right thing, he was like, "All right, we'll take it." So, um, yeah, I don't know. I guess that's my epiphany. That might sound kind of underwhelming, but that's what I got from Kubrick.